How about the lying flat movement and the great uh, resignation? In China, they're calling it, it translates kind of stiltedly to lying flat. What it means is that instead of getting up and working, you lie flat, you don't work. And they're seeing a huge drop off of people who are not working anymore. They become very frustrated. I guess I read it, some parts in China, you work 15 hours a day, 6 hours a week. I mean, 6 days a week. And I think they get Saturday off. You can't have Sunday off. Saturday, I believe. But uh, uh, this has left people totally frustrated. Uh, in a communist system, unless you know the right people, you can work like a dog and you never get ahead. It's not like you're going to be up. You would think if somehow, let's say I have a job and start working 15 hours a week, you know, a lot of that's almost, what is that? Uh, Quite a few hours. It's almost like doubling your paycheck, especially, or is doubling your paycheck when you figure here in the States you'd be getting time and a half of those other hours. I'm sure that doesn't happen in uh, communist China, because communist China, uh, you know, you give what you can and you only take what you need. That's the kind of the philosophical idea behind communism. But of course, it's just another system of oppression. The rich get super rich and the poor remain poor. So what you're seeing is people have become terribly disillusioned by this. And so they're basically quitting their jobs. Uh, Now, I don't know what kind of support system there is. I mean, if you quit a job here in the U.S., excuse me, you can get unemployment. It used to be that there was a 12-week rule. In other words, if you quit a job, you had to wait 12 whole weeks to get unemployment. But basically, that isn't true anymore. I know that I left one job just because things that were going on and stuff like that and how I was treated and everything. And I had this phone interview with uh, the unemployment office. They said, well, we have to have this interview. We're gonna call you at such and such a time. And they called me, asked me a couple questions, and they said, well, it's not your fault that you left. Really? So I got the unemployment, for that. Then I think I'd been unemployed for a week or two. I got that retroactive and continued to get unemployment until I worked again. But I don't know what's in place like that in China. Uh, if there's some baseline pay that you get, whether you work or not or whatever. But basically, there's a huge number of people who are just not working. They found it too stressful, little time for their own lives, their own interests and everything. And so they're just not working. Now, interestingly, lying flat evidently doesn't mean that you're having children either. The amount of children that Chinese people are having has dropped dramatically. I mean, they had the one-child policy, but they moved it up to two-child policy, but basically China is in the same level of births now that the America is and Germany is in, which means that we're not replacing the population. It's too low. Except for me, I tried my best with 6 kids to make up for all you people that aren't doing your jobs. But anyway, the idea is that we know from all kinds of studies with wildlife populations and everything that when you remove the young from the equation somehow, whether it's abortion or choosing just not to have children, have young, when you take those out of the population somehow, the average age of the population gets older and older. So eventually what you end up having is a lot of old people that need to be taken care of, and a lot less young, healthy people to take care of them. Now, you would think that goes it's like more of a financial thing because you need a tax base. In other words, if you're going to put all these people in homes or give them all the medical care, which, it's expensive as you get older. I guarantee you, I found that out. But uh, that's where the money comes from to some degree, is the taxes that, that you put in when you were young and what other people who are young put in themselves. And uh, that's just not happening. So in a place like China that is they already had a massive problem because it was only to couples' advantages to have boys because of the society, the way things work, and very few uh, daughters, especially when the one-child policy were, you know, brought to term or uh, lived after. So uh, it's quirked the population. So eventually they're saying in some areas there'll be 17 men for every woman. Now that gives women advantage because a woman from, a poor town can walk into any city and just pick someone, that's wealthy, and they'll marry her. As we're saying, it's that ridiculous. But of course, that isn't going to go well for everyone else because all of a sudden out in the village, you're just going to be having, old guys and old women too. But you know what I'm saying? And young men, but no women. So, China has these forces working against them now, and it's going to take a toll. It's already taking a toll with all of these people. And what's happened is they've become disillusioned, and that's the important thing to remember. In a communist system, it's all about working for the state. All this, propaganda type stuff that they do, but you soon find out that that doesn't work. There's nothing there. There's nothing. You can't reach some goal or anything like that again, unless you're really connected somehow. Then you can get filthy rich. But so let's talk about more now. We'll switch to United States and Germany that were covered in this article. And I'll put the link below if I can find it again. But we have a case where people in the U.S. and Germany too left the workforce. And the U.S. is saying 24 million people left the workforce. Now, what does that mean? That means they have no intention of working again, at least for a while. Or they're nominally working. In other words, you pick up a short job, you get a little money, and then you live it up until you need more money. But they don't want to be in this rat race of working all these hours and all that stress to accumulate money. And again, it's this disillusionment factor that's come in. People have seen here in the U.S., and the pandemic has brought this forward. Everybody's been forced to kind of reevaluate their lives a little. And it's like maybe having, that really expensive car isn't that big a deal. Now, I'm looking for a used car now that I can put a wheelchair lift on, and I'll tell you, there's not many used cars out there, and they're expensive. Because, why? People kept them during the pandemic. People decided that it wasn't that important to have a brand new car. Some people switch your car every 2 or 3 years, whether they lease it or buy it. A lot of times people will lease it, and they lease it for a while, and then they just flip over to a new car. That way they've always got, a fairly new, nice car. But here in the U.S., with the pandemic, people seeing people dying, people with time on their hands, again, are forced into some kind of, usually a reevaluation. And what they've decided here, these 24 million people, is work isn't worth it. They don't want to work. And I mean, obviously you have to work to support yourself, but I can sympathize totally with these people when they realize that some of the companies they're working for could care less about them. A company can turn around and just fire you without a notice, but they expect you to give 2 weeks notice or a month notice, whatever, depending on the job. And I think people have come to decide here, to in America, that the the work that they do in a lot of companies just isn't worth it. It isn't just the money doesn't cut it anymore. People are looking for something else, and so you have these people. Uh, uh, and my big question, of course, is how can they afford to do it? And it's like, well, you know, some people were able to bank those $600 a week checks that the government was giving out to unemployed people. If you had a means of uh, lower cost of living somehow, maybe you move back in with your parents, or you're in a house with some other friends, and altogether you're only paying a small amount, but they're saying people are opting to use savings now rather than saving it. In other words, they want their life more leisure time, and they don't want to be in this rat race where they're grinding through all this stuff. And maybe the job's dangerous. Maybe it's just, how many companies have I worked for where the bosses were like total jerks? That's all you can say. I mean, quite a few of them. And I think people are saying, I don't want to do that. I know if I look back at my work career, I think if I had done the same work career without a family, I wouldn't have stayed in some of the jobs as long as I did. The idea of having insurance and different things like that and your expenses ties you into employers. But if, like I say, if I was single, I think my career path would have been different. I'm not complaining about, what it is or where I am today, but I think I would have done things differently with some of the stupid jobs and bosses I had. But it's interesting. Are these people, 24 million people, going to go back to work? It's like you look around you, every place has a hiring sign. I know there's a shortage of truck drivers. Truck drivers, they make some good money. But again, people are looking at it and say, no, I don't, that's hard. I don't want to go on these long trips and be away from home. I don't want to be sitting in a truck all the time. I don't, it's like they want something else. And it's funny, in the morning sometimes I get something at Cumberland Farms, and I'm in there and I'm looking at the door, and there's this notice there. And they've cut their hours already, right? Because they don't have enough people. But they're actually closing on Sunday now. Why? Shortage of employees. I'm sure what's been happening probably, like every time I go in there, the manager guy is in there. And I've got a feeling that he's in there all the time the store is open almost. Or a lot. He has to cover any of the hours that he can't get people for. And so eventually that kind of breaks down, and they have to close Sunday so people can have one day off at least. So it's really bizarre, like I say, this phenomenon of people leaving the workplace for good. Now see, with these people leaving the workforce, okay, they don't show up in unemployment numbers. So sometimes you can look at unemployment numbers and you're like, oh wow, this is great. No, it isn't. It doesn't count the people who went home and just quit. They're not looking for work. They're not getting unemployment benefits. They just left and don't want to go and aren't going back. So having low unemployment numbers is sometimes not a really good indicator. And studies they've shown, in the U.S. In recent years, show that this, especially now, there's a large number of people that are not working and not seeking employment. And like I say, I can understand and sympathize with their feelings, but eventually, I think they will have to, go back to work. And people are also going down to less stressed jobs. I can understand that too, but less stress, less money, less chance of saving money. It's so expensive to live, especially here in Maine. But there you go. there's the thing about the lying flat in China to the Great Resignation and the low birth rates, and all of that is all not, I'm not saying good can't come out of it, but right now it's bad for the world economy, and in the long run, if people stay like this, it isn't going to be healthy for them as well. Bye.